So today is the last whole class that we're going to have. Let me point out where we are in the calendar. So it's spring or fall break next week. And what we're going to do on the week after Thanksgiving is we're going to have individual conferences when you bring your paper to class, or I'm sorry, to the conference. I think I better make this a little.
Did we already sign up for conference times?
No, I will be sending out a conference thing when I send out the video, the recording from class today, and I will ask you to sign up for one, and then I will remind you after Thanksgiving. They will be 30 minutes with 15 minutes extra, and I plan to do them mostly on Tuesday and Thursday of next week, assuming that that's the days that you are more likely to be available. And then the following week, we don't have class. We do not have an exam, no exam in this class, but the final persuasive report will be due on December 10th.
Are you grading the final paper as a final? Like, is it worth more, or is it just worth the same as the other papers?
It is worth more, but that's on the syllabus, the
Okay.
value. It's worth more just because it's bigger and involves more things. And there's this final reflection, and I will have this sent out as well when I send everything out together. And what that will involve is it's an essay that has you reflect about the class. So any questions just about the schedule?
So on December the 8th and 10th, we're not going to see you at all, except at all.
Right.
Okay. Okie doke.
I mean, you are welcome to make an appointment to see me. In fact, you're welcome to we will have an appointment one-on-one at least once, December 1, the week after Thanksgiving. Right. You are welcome to ask to talk to me at another time too.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So today is the last class as a whole. Yay. Do I hear cheers? Oh, you're all muted. Okay. So we have a lot to do by then. So today what I want to do is talk about writing persuasive reports. And there are a lot of skills involved in it, both in trying to be persuasive and in trying to incorporate the research. And let me get rid of this. High floating meeting controls. So you've probably heard these terms, logos, ethos, and pathos. And they are from Aristotle. He talked about 3 ways of persuading people. He preferred logos. He didn't prefer pathos, but pathos is an emphasis on emotions. When you try to manipulate somebody or make somebody feel really sad or guilty, that is trying to persuade somebody based on pathos. Ethos, and you can see the root of ethos in an English word, ethics. Ethos has to do with the speaker's credibility. And whoops, there. Sorry, I was trying to move my Brady Bunch screens. Ethos has to do with the credibility of the speaker. And, you know, sometimes some people just have credibility. You know, if a person is a leader. So sometimes people have credibility. You know, if President Obama starts talking and says something, he has credibility just because you probably know who he is, and he, you know, was the president of the United States. But most of the time we try to establish credibility through our writing. And one of the ways we do that is by using research and using scholarly research and using it effectively and well. So that establishes our credibility and helps in the persuading. And then the third strategy for persuasion is logos, and you see the root in the English word logical, of course, and the emphasis is on reasoning. Now, for this assignment, our focus is both logos and ethos. And obviously, we want to have good reasoning in what we're doing. It may not be so obvious with the ethos. One of the things about ethos is that it's not just so much the credibility of the speaker and the knowledgeableness of the speaker, but also the attitude of the speaker. And one of the key things that you do to improve your ethos is to show awareness of the audience concerns and values. So it's sort of paradoxical that the idea of the ethos is to focus on the credibility of the speaker, but that the looking at the thinking about what is important to the audience helps improve your credibility. And you see that with people who, you know, just in everyday conversation all the time. The person who completely disregards you when you're talking loses ethos. You don't really trust that person if they are just blabbing away and not paying attention to you and anything that you say. And so that's something that to think about when you're doing this project. And I have to move this up here. The key question is, how do you convince the audience that something is worth their investment? That's going to be the key question in almost all of your projects. That is, almost all of your projects are probably going to cost money or some other resource, time, energy, care. So you have to convince the audience that something is worth their investment. In order to do that, you need to figure out what is important to them so that they'll see that it's worth their investment. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to talk about sort of a strategy for thinking about that. But I want to stop by asking everybody to either take out a piece of paper or jot something or a computer and write down for yourself who exactly is going to be your audience in the report and what they care about. And the second question is, what should they care about? So that partly you know what they care about already, but partly you're persuading them that they should care about something else. So if you're proposing speed bumps or some other public works, different kinds of trash thing, they're going to be concerned about the cost of doing that. But on the other hand, they're also the city or the county, whoever you're asking to do that, they also care about serving the people in their districts. And so you can kind of assume that. And maybe they should care about people in their districts staying in their districts and not moving somewhere else where there are better services and people are more responsive. And so you can kind of just think about that in that. So I'm going to stop talking. I want everybody to spend about 5 minutes thinking about writing down who your audience is and what they care about and should care about. Okay. So here are the basic things to think about in planning your persuasive report. Audience concerns and values, which is what I just talked about. Some kind of research to support it, that's going to add to your credibility. And the basic part of any kind of persuasion is a claim plus reasons. My sample paper on the Trojan Transit has a claim, which is that the university should reinstitute the Trojan Transit, and it has some reasons. One of the reasons is safety, another is students with disabilities, another is it fits with the mission of a commuter institution. Whoops. I know you've seen this, but that claim plus reasons shows up right at the top, because I'm doing this as a memo with a subject line, request to reinstitute the daytime Trojan Transit. And it shows up in my headings. What are the reasons? 3 reasons. Promoting safety, accommodating students with disabilities, and providing access for urban students. And then finally, a conclusion. So I have worked out what my main claim is and what my reasons are. I could give like a little elevator pitch. If somebody said, what's your project for? I could say, I want to reinstitute the Trojan Transit because of these 3 reasons. Now, I want to just remind you that I have done this paper without showing you all the citations, and I have all these yellow things stuck in here. And was that done because I'm not finished? No, it was done so that I could show you how I went about writing this. I went about writing this, making my argument and thinking about the research that I had read, which I definitely had read. And then as I was writing my argument, I knew there were points that I had read about that I would include. And so I'm just kind of reminding myself of what to do. But the real point is, I wrote my argument. I didn't have the research sitting there in front of me so that I was cutting and pasting it all. I was writing an argument and using the research when I needed it to be there. And I'm going to propose that everybody use this template as a way of planning it. I'm going to put this template into the chat. Share it after class as well, just by email. Because what I want everybody to do is to download this persuasive report planning template and use it. Now, you can't just write into the one that I've given you, because then everybody's writing on the same one. In this case, everybody's going to be writing on a different one. And so in order to use it for yourself, you need to do one of two things. You can either download it as a Word file, or make a copy before typing on it. So to download it as a Word file, you would go to File, then you would download. So under File, go select Download, and then download it as a Microsoft Word document. You click on that, and depending how your computer's set up, it will pop up and you can save it to somewhere. So here you have it. It's downloading to my computer, and I would find the place to put it. The alternate way to do this is to keep it in a Google Doc and make a copy. So you make a copy, and when that comes up, my folder will show up, and you want to, well, actually, I'm not sure what will show up, but you want to move it to your own folder somewhere. So you should be able to get to your own My Drive, and then you copy it to something and change its name to something like this. And you would not share it with the same people, not copy anything, and you click OK, and then you have it.
Now, is this going to be another assignment, or is this just for us to use while we're doing our paper to help us like format it correctly?
I'm going to ask you to bring it to the conference the week after Thanksgiving.
Along with our draft paper.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank
you. So yes, I want you to do it because I want you to have the experience of working things out. So this is what's in here. And you can just type in, once you've made a copy in Word or a Google copy, then you just would fill it in. And let me show you what I did with my paper. So I am using a pretty classic structure here for persuasion. It's been around since before Aristotle. It is a pretty natural kind of way of doing it. You don't have to do it. This is not a rigid formula. It must be adapted. But this will help you kind of stay on track and write a persuasive argument. So in the introduction, some kind of summary, the claim plus the reasons, we're going to talk about that in a minute, may need to establish context. So going back to something I had you read before, that chapter from the online textbook, and the idea of some things being solicited and some things being unsolicited. Most of your projects are unsolicited, and either in a cover memo or the introduction of the report itself, you're going to probably have to explain who you are and why you're writing and what's the whole context of the situation, because they're not going to know why somebody out of the blue is telling them to do something. So you need to explain who you are and why you're writing. This may be you're a citizen of their community, or you're a student at the institution, or you're a member of this group, or whatever. In the middle column is the stuff, is where to write the specifics from your own report. And in the third column is to put down research sources, or I should probably say evidence and research sources. Because sometimes it's not so much research as just information. So the first section is the introduction, and really continuing in the introduction is trying to clarify whatever the problem is, whatever the situation is that's triggering this. And when you start talking about problems, there are all sorts of things you can talk about. I mean, it can be causes, it can be results, it can be a history. You might identify criteria for solving the problem. In some sense, my reasons are actually criteria for solving the problem. And I put in green at this point to remind you, you need to be thinking about it from the audience's perspective. So I'm writing about to an internal campus audience, to the administration of ULR, and saying they need to reinstitute the Trojan Transit. The only thing anybody seems to care about at ULR as of right now is enrollment and retention, enrollment and retention, enrollment and retention. Also called student success, I guess. But keeping the student, getting students and keeping our students is a primary concern for everybody. And so I have to think about, how does this issue relate to enrollment and retention? And frankly, I believe it does, because not having a way to get from the big parking lots to the places on campus, and some of you may not have been on campus ever or yet, is a problem for many students, and it may cause them not to stay. So about 10 years ago, well, maybe it's 15 or 20, they came up with a campus master plan to redesign the campus so it was more of a walking campus with fewer roads running through the campus and moving most of the parking. They'd like to move all the parking at that time out to the perimeter. Particularly the low cost or free parking is all in the perimeter in lot 13, 14, or on the deck, in the deck, or I forgot to put down the big lots over on Asher. And now they've built dorms across Asher, which is even further than big lots. And in my opinion, they are trying to redesign the campus more like a traditional campus, or they want, I guess it's okay to have it like that, but they still have to think about their primary people. And many faculty and staff choose to pay for the interior lots, but few students will pay for the interior lots. So first section is introduction. Second is the problem. Thinking about, setting up the situation so that my audience will understand what's going on. Then I need to identify my reasons. So I have identified 3 different reasons. If I can get a little. One is one of safety. When you have lots that are that far away, people don't always feel safe parking out there and then walking all the way back to the campus. One is that there are students with disabilities, and they can't walk all the way. And that's not a minor issue because the institution has to comply with ADA. And thirdly, that many students do not have time to walk that far. Because many students are commuter students. Most ULR students are commuter students. And even the commuter student, even the people living on campus often leave campus for jobs and family and activities, etc. And so they often run out of time as well. Now, note what I've done here in the 3rd column. I've tried to describe what the evidence and research is that I might use there. So on the safety issue, that is actually, federally required for there to be reports. So I can get the report about any safety issues, any problems that people have had. I also know there are studies about the perception of safety at ULR, and I can get that and use that as source material. On the students with disabilities issue, I can find out the numbers of students at ULR with disabilities, and hopefully I could find out the numbers of students with mobility issues at ULR. I read in this article by Garland in 2015 that nationwide, there's about 6% of all college students have some kind of disability. But among those, it's about 20% who have mobility disabilities. Well, actually, no, that was orthopedic disabilities. So there'd be other ones that have mobility disabilities, which would include like people with visually impaired, etc. So I can find out research about the number of students this affects at ULR. I put down there 2 research sources as well. So this article by Garland from 2015, note that I put the parentheses around there just like APA, just kind of remind myself, talks about the idea of universal design and inclusive design rather than requiring disability students to make specific requests. And I'm thinking about that because that is in fact what the university ended up with when they got rid of the Trojan Transit. They still had to have something for students with disabilities, and they have to go to the well, it's actually unclear who they have to go to. We have to go somewhere and get a disabled person's parking tag and get a card that will allow us into any place in order to do this. And I know this because I tried to do it, or I did do it. And I will tell you, it took me 3 weeks to get my disabled person's parking thing. And if a student has to go through that kind of experience, chances are they're not going to want to stay. And I guess I could think about whether I actually include my personal experience in it. Additionally, I found some articles, the Campus Legal Advisor article and Disability Compliance in Higher Ed, that are all about it. We'll look at my sample thing again. And then the third reason having to do with just the issues for commuter students who don't have time and who get more stressed out because of the constant back and forth. And there were 2 sources that I could work with, at least, Jacoby 2015 and Clark 2006. In my reference list by Garland, etc., but I don't actually have it included in the report yet. Here are the Campus Legal Advisor ones. They don't have an author. They're just describing legal cases that have actually occurred. And this is another one, disability compliance for higher ed. Distance is a factor with parking accessibility. So that means a court determined that in a discrimination claim. I had Clark listed for the issues of the commuter student, and you can see why it would be used: succeeding in the city, challenges and best practices in urban commuter campuses. So to go back, first there's an introduction, then there's a problem, and that can kind of merge together. Then you start talking about, your argument itself. And another section you could then have is identifying counter arguments. Why do we like to identify counter arguments? Well, you can strengthen your own argument by thinking about objections to your argument. So the obvious counter argument is that it's very expensive. I talked about this to a friend of mine. She said, well, this exercise is good for students. They need to have exercise. And then the actual counter argument that they're adopting, which is that they had an alternate strategy for students with disabilities. And I thought, well, maybe I could mention the problem with that current model by describing my own bad experience. Expense and exercise is good for you. Those might be objections that you just acknowledge, because basically what we want to say is it may be expensive, but it's worth the cost. And then thinking about not just bringing up the objections, but then responding to them, addressing. And the official term, the technical term in persuasion is called rebutting. How do I rebut that? And my basic rebuttal is going to be that the student body is a non-traditional student body. And then finally, a conclusion where you summarize the reasons to do this and maybe call for action or make next steps, or, you know, somehow whatever's next. All right. Let me stop and ask, are there questions about this? I would like everybody at this point, I'd like to use the chat if we can. I would like everybody to post a chat in which you make kind of like what I would call the elevator pitch version of your argument. That is, you are writing to so-and-so to convince them to do such and such for these reasons. So I will post my chat as an example. So this is great. You guys did a really good job. It seems like you have, you know, are focusing on the project, and you started to have some good reasons. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to use that template, which starts with the claim and the reasons, and flesh it out as much as you can. Figure out where you're going to put your research, and you may figure out that you need some more research. That's fine too. You definitely can do additional research past the annotated bibliography. You do not have to use all the sources from your annotated bibliography if they're not useful. And in many cases, they may not be, because you know, we're just trying to meet the assignment. You may need to find some research that is not necessarily in the research that is not necessarily in the academic database, other kinds of research. So for example, I said that with the Trojan Transit, I would want to get some copies of the studies that have been done about perception of safety at ULR. And I would want to also look into the reports that they do about criminal activity at ULR, to see if there's something at the in the parking lot. Yes.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's hard to tell on Zoom, but so I guess that's kind of what you were just saying. But so on the annotated bibliography, I have 3 journal articles like from the library or whatever that aren't really, obviously not specific to like this college, but are like about other colleges and about alcohol use and stuff like that, that apply to my topic. And so far, I haven't read through it like completely, but I guess my question is, if I were to read through it completely and as I'm writing my paper, I realize that it's not the best article like for my paper, like am I allowed to like change it out and like just put it in the annotated bibliography at the end of my paper?
So at the end of your paper, you're going to put a list of references,
Uh-huh.
which is as opposed to the annotated bibliography. It's going to be a list of references. Those references have to be references you use. So you can definitely change out from what's in the annotated bibliography. You are not committed to anything you put in the annotated bibliography.
Okay, so the
And,
annotated bibliography was like a separate assignment. Like that's not something we're gonna add into the paper.
well, hopefully you all found resources that are useful.
Yeah.
So if you found resources that are useful, definitely include
Like
them.
utilize them.
Right. But
Don't put the bibliography as the paper. We put a reference list at the end of the paper.
yeah. So
Okay.
it was a separate assignment. It had, I think it's 50 points, and I'm going to be giving you feedback and grading them back. The list of references at the end will not have the annotations. In the paper itself, it's just going to be the list of references. Other questions? Okay. And again, I'm going to share the chat. The chat is recorded as well, or is downloaded as well. So when I share the video recording, I will also share the chat, and that included the link to the template. I've also put the template in Blackboard, and I will add it to the website as well. I want to return to a piece of, I guess they call it an infographic, that the APA did. And I really think this is very helpful because it emphasizes kind of the way sources are used in APA. And I found myself on a lot of the informative reports about writing in your profession, saying that in APA, they tend to not really like quotations. They rather like you to paraphrase and summarize. And in many ways, what APA does is you say something and then you just try to find some source that will back you up. And so you say, read the work you want to cite, and then identify an idea you want to put in your paper. So some idea that is in your paper that is also in this article that you looked at. And then write a sentence about that idea. Not figure out a quote to take out of the paper, but rather write a sentence that restates the idea that is both something you want to say and that is in the article that you're reading, or source that you're reading. Then you write a reference list entry for the work and add the corresponding in-text citation to the sentence and repeat as needed for more works and ideas. So, all right. The basic principle behind the in-text citation with APA is that when you cite it, you need to give enough information in your citation in the text to point the person to the item in the list of references. Almost always the list of references is going to start with the last name of the first author. And so that's what's going to go in the in-text citation. Every once in a while, there is no author. And so you have to start with a title or a group author. If that's the case, then that has to start with the parenthetical citation. APA always, if you have an item in your list of references, that means you have used it and cited it. So there must be a match between everything that's cited in the paper and your list of references. And it must go both directions. So everything in your list of references must have been cited somewhere. So you may be reading a bunch of stuff. That's fine. It can be helpful. But unless you've referred to it directly, you're not going to put it in your list of references. It's really simple to do APA citations. Basically, you need that last name and the year. There are two kinds of citations, and that's what this handout is about: parenthetical versus narrative. So the parenthetical is one where at the end of the statement that paraphrases the person's idea, you put a parentheses, and it's the last name, comma, 2016. Now, if you have a group author that starts with US text code or something, or if you have an article that doesn't have a author, so it just starts with the title, then you give a short version of that group name or title. And that's all you need to do with a comma and then the year. Now, a lot of times people do narrative citations, and that's nice because it's even less interruption to the reading process. And what you do there is the thing that would have been first in the parentheses is you actually use it in your own sentence. And then you just follow it with the year, or if it's a longer date, the full date. So Kohler noted the dangers of falsely balanced news coverage. When you do that, it really is clear whose idea is what. Now, one of the things I found in the informative reports is that people were putting citations at the end of a paragraph that had a whole bunch of different ideas. Well, if I'm reading that, I don't know which of the ideas in that paragraph are actually from that citation. And so what you want to do as much as possible is tie the actual in-text citation, whether it's narrative or in-text or parenthetical, tie that citation to the actual idea of the author. Now, I have, there is one other thing that I think is useful, and so I'm just going to share it with you. We don't have time to actually do it, but this handout gives you some practice at doing APA in-text citations and paraphrasing. And I would say that paraphrasing is the skill that people need most to work on. Paraphrasing and summarizing, so that you really understand what the person is saying and can put it in your own words. The nice thing about summarizing is that if you summarize, you're taking a lot of idea material and getting it down to its essence. And so they give these examples. I'm just going to look at this first one, and then we're going to look at the correct answer And I suggest that if you haven't really figured out about APA in-text citation, you try doing these activities. So this handout gives you the source information, but just as a list. And here's the sentence that they're asking you to paraphrase. Leaders who lack emotional and social competence undoubtedly can become a liability to organizations, leading to employee disengagement, absenteeism, stress disability claims, hostile workplace lawsuits, and increased healthcare expenses. So that's a lot of big words, and it's a lot of semi-technical words. Presumably it's from an article that's covering emotional and social competence, and in fact it probably is. The title of the article is Empathy Enhancing Antidotes for Interpersonally Toxic Leaders. So if I were to paraphrase this, I might say leaders without empathy can hurt organizations, leading to employee discontent and increased costs. That is a paraphrase of what is said. I get the main things in there, but I am using totally only my own words, not theirs. Now, once I write that sentence, I would put in-text citation, one that's parenthetical would be Nowak and Zach, and with an ampersand, comma 2020. That would be in parentheses, and it would be at the end of the sentence. I could use a narrative one and say, Nowak and Zach, and then parentheses 2020, argue that leaders without empathy can hurt their organizations, blah, blah, blah. So this actually is an interactive worksheet, so you could actually do it. And then you go ahead and you can see what they recommend. Employees experience negative outcomes such as stress and disengagement when their organizational leaders lack emotional and social skills. So they actually turned it around. In their paraphrase, that's fine. That probably would make sense. And that actually gets us to one of the reasons why it is better to use paraphrase and summary than quotation, because the paraphrase and summary allows you to rework the language so it fits in with your style and your point. So this makes sense. This would be a great paraphrase if you are talking about what research has shown, that how employees are affected. So here's the paraphrase, and then Nowak and Zach, comma 2020 is the in-text citation. If I were to do that as a narrative one, I would say Nowak and Zach, parentheses 2020, say that employees experience negative blah, 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 blah. So one thing to pay attention to here, when you're doing the whole in-text citation with parentheses, that goes at the end of the sentence. But if you have a narrative one where you mention the author's name in your own sentence, then the parentheses follows that right away. And here is their example. Bernecker and Kramer 2020 found that this is the second one, and how they did it. And then they also give you the reference list entry. Okay, so I'm going to
Miss
include that.
Matthew, I hate to interrupt you, but I have to go back to work now. It's
Yeah.
time. So, all right. Thank you so much.
So I have added this, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Worksheet in the chat because I think it would be really helpful for people to try practicing that. And they have the answers at the end, so you can, check yourself and see if you're doing it correctly by doing that exercise. There are actually other exercises all over the various places that I've suggested where you try getting your resources, and I encourage you to do that. Okay, so end of class. I look forward to seeing y'all each individually one-on-one after Thanksgiving. I will be sending out a doodle poll for you to sign up for a time, and be sure that you give yourself a reminder of what that is. At that individual conference, you should bring a draft. It doesn't have to be complete, but it should be a draft. And you should bring that filled in template because I think that's an activity that will really help you figuring out what you have and what you need to have and how to organize your argument. Questions?
Miss
So I will
Watson,
be grading the annotated bibliographies and giving them back to you because the skills in the annotated bibliography are skills that you will be using again in the paper itself. Specifically, the skill of summarizing and the skill of doing a reference.
Reagan had something to say. She was trying to talk.
Yeah, we're going to meet after class.
Yes, that's what it was about.
Yeah.
I was just
So
asking,
you'll
did you
just
want
stay
me to?
on when everybody else leaves. We can just use the same. Any
Okay.
other questions? All righty.
Cool.